Hi guys, welcome back to Codicast. So for today's video, I will be reviewing this model. So as you can see here, we got the Street Warrior, and the model itself is the RWB 993 Rotana. And this is one of the many versions that they make, and this one particularly being the kind of like a track car, because as you can see here, we got the race car number on the door, and then we're going to take a closer look on the details of this model later. But first things first, I want to talk about the packaging. So the packaging itself for this Street Warrior is very similar to the brand named Street Weapon. And if you take a closer look at the packaging, it also kind of replicating the Street Weapons. And I assume that those two brands are in the same factory, or maybe they were all one of the brands is the sister company. I don't know, because those two brands looks exactly the same, like the packaging and then the font that they were using for the brands and the other stuff, like it is practically the same. And then if you look at the metal plate on the base, I'm going to show you later when I open the packaging. This kind of like suggesting that those two brands are closely related. So yeah, anyway, the packaging itself, it's pretty much like I said, pretty much the same as the Street Weapon. We got the Street Warrior name on the front, we got the 1/64 scale, and then we got the Street Warrior on the back of the card. And then we got the Ghost Player. I think this is the collaboration model that they make with the Ghost Player. As you can see here, Ghost Player simulated alloy automobile model. So this is a kind of typo that were kind of commonly happen to this unlicensed or shady brands. And then we got to see the Street Weapon logo, and then on the back we got to see the name itself again, and then on the bottom we got to see the unnecessary things for us to read, and also the 1/64 scale made in China. And you also notice that this brand is an unlicensed, like I said before, because you couldn't see any kind of licensing or any kind of logo on the bottom of the packaging. So yeah, I think that's about it for the packaging, and now let's take a closer look on model and see the details. Right, so as I've showed you earlier about the base itself, we got to see the metal plate, and it said this is a Street Weapon on the metal plate. So again, I'm assuming that these two brands, the Street Weapon and the Street Warrior, is the same brand, but I don't know why they make a different name. And then we got to see the Ghost Player logo again, and then the model name, the Raw Welt Begriff. So this is an RWB model, but they didn't mention any kind of like model like the 993 or the variant like the Rotana on the nameplate, maybe kind of like to simplify the metal plate. And then we got to see the limited edition 477 of 499, but I'm not really sure if they only make this model for this number. So yeah, anyway, the model itself, I think this is a pretty good looking model, especially about the RWB. And looking at the castings, I think they were kind of stole the ignition model resin model, the toolings, because it looks very similar to what ignition model did with their resin model. The details for the front parts of this model is pretty it's pretty detailed. By the way, this is, like I said earlier, this is a kind of like a track car of the Rotana. This is a track car version, and as you can see, there are lots of sponsors, and there are a race car number, and there are lots of aero parts like this front canards and this rear fender canards, another canards, and another canards, these two stepped or two level canards with the GT wings. Yeah, so this model has a lot of aero parts, which is really interesting, and it kind of adds more level, more details to the model. So the front itself, we got this RWB plate that was glued to the bumper. And then if you look at the bottom of the plate, we got to see this tow hook painted in red. So this is a pretty nice detail. And we got to see some writings on the rubber bumper, on the like bumper lip. And then we got to see the iconic and a very iconic name to the RWB, the Zuid and Wicklung, which means the second development that was kind of created by Nakai-san. And then for the headlights, because this is a track car, and I think Nakai didn't want to or didn't need to use the headlights, so he replaced it with this kind of air intakes for both side of the headlights. And I think they replicate these parts pretty well. And then moving on to the side, the front canards is going through from the front bumper, going through to like the middle section of the fender, of the front fender. And then continuing to the side profile of this model, I think this is a very nice proportion of the 993. As you can see, the roofline is pretty straight up, and it's not kind of like a narrow one like other brands make. I'm not going to talk about the brands. And then the details again for the side parts of this model is pretty insane. As you can see, we got this what do you call this, the air intakes maybe, with this painted and textured grille. And then we got to see the name of the car itself, it's Rotana. And then we got to see the race car number, and then the sponsor like the Sauber F1 team. And then on the bottom we got to see the New York Times sponsor. I don't know if it's sponsor or just a sticker. And then moving on to the rear fender, we got to see another livery or sponsors. What this is it PPC? I don't know. And then on the bottom, speed something, and then Motis. Moving on to the rear side, I'm gonna talk about the wheels first. So the wheels itself is not really kind of detailed on the inside, but as you can see from the outside, the barrel itself, it has a different depth for the front and the rear, which is really interesting details, because the front fender and the rear fender has a different width, so a different width, so they kind of make the wheels on the rear side a lot more concave, a lot more deeper, so that is nice. But the details itself on the wheels, it's pretty okay, but not too detailed, because the face of the wheels itself is pretty flat. It doesn't have any kind of shapes or something like the texturing. And then on the inside, the disc brakes itself, it's not fixed in one place. So if you roll this model, the disc brake will rolling with the wheels itself, so it's not staying in one place. So that's kind of a shame. And then what else? The backs itself, it's, I think this is the most interesting parts of the model, because the Rotana itself, they have a different version of this model. Like they have the wings itself, they have like kind of like two versions, the GT wing and then the two level wings, like the higher one. And then about the bumper, I think this is the version where Nakai-san's kind of like cut the rear bumper to kind of show you the details of the exhaust pipes and then on the engine and the other stuff. So this one is pretty nice details. So we got to see the pipings and the exhaust itself, the what is this, the ing or ing on the exhaust. And then what else? And oh, also the bumper cut is pretty accurate and pretty detailed, so you could see that this kind of like mimicking that the bumper itself is cut before the get panel line right here, so they still have a little parts of the rear bumper sticking to the model, so which is really nice. And then for the rear side, we got to see the RWB logo on the rear spoiler, and then another Zweet and Wicklung name. And also on the back, on the other side of the spoiler, we got to see the New York Times name again. And then on the top, you got to see the Motis, which is really nice. And then if you look at the interior, aside from the plain black interior on the front, but we could still see this kind of piping that we're going through from the C-pillar right here. So they kind of like following the air intake onto the engine using these pipings on the interior, which is really nice detail. And then you got to see this kind of chromed or silver details also on the inside. And then what else? We got to see this plexiglass kind of side window with these small openings that were very common in a race cars. Um, and we got to see the row welt on the windshield, and also this is a separate parts for the wiper, which is really nice. And then we got to see this kind of like air intakes on the fender, and also the race car number and some Arabic name on here. I don't know, I think that is Arabic, but you guys let me know if I'm making a mistake. Yeah, so after this, I'm going to unscrew the model from the base, and we're going to have a quick look at the base itself. So yeah, so this is what the base looks like. So it's pretty plain and pretty simple, but when you look at the rear side of this base, then you'll see enough details for you to see. So you got to see this like the engine details, like the pipings, like I said before. And then you got to see well, what kind of part is this, I don't know, but I'm just gonna show you the details from the underneath of the car, which is this really interesting to see. So yeah, that is pretty detailed one. Oh, and also the side mirrors is also has a reflective sticker, so that's nice. I think, yeah, I think that's about it for this RWB 993 Rotana from Street Warrior. And I'll see you guys on the next video. So thank you guys for watching. Bye.